Welcome to the third of 5 video lectures on William Shakespeare's history, Henry IV, Part 1. In this video lecture, I will walk us through Act 3 of the play, beginning with a scene in the north between Hotspur and Mortimer and Glendower as they prepare for war. The next scene, which goes back to Henry IV, and for the first time we see Henry IV together with his son Prince Hal in a scene much anticipated in Act 2. We saw Falstaff and Prince Hal practice for this. Now we're going to see the real thing. And then to culminate, Prince Hal's return to the tavern as he gets ready to march north to war. All right, Act 3, Scene 1 is indeed in the north. And we have Hotspur, his uncle Worcester, and Lord Mortimer. We see him for the first time, and Owen Glendower we see for the first time as well. You'll remember Mortimer, Edmund Mortimer, is the man who has a legitimate claim to the throne. Perhaps, depending on our argument, a better claim to the throne, in fact, than even King Henry. That's up to some interpretation and a historical argument to be made, but there's the possibility there, and that's what this fight really is about. However, interestingly, Edmund Mortimer is pretty quiet in this scene. He doesn't have a lot to say. Neither does Worcester. Primarily, this is a scene between Glendower, Owen Glendower, and Hotspur. And if you remember, before the play even starts, these folks had been at war. Hotspur had been at war with Owen Glendower. So it stands to reason that their reconciliation might not be fully captured, that they might still have some disagreements. And indeed they do. Let's jump into Act 3, Scene 1, and go ahead and look at some of these lines between these two characters. Both fiery characters. Hotspur known for his temper. Owen Glendower, who we're just meeting for the first time, no less known for his temper. But he's a little more subdued here than he might be with someone else. He needs Hotspur. He wants Hotspur. He wants to be his ally. Anyway, line 7. Glendower speaking. He's put a map out before them, and he says, "Sit, good cousin Hotspur, for by that name as oft as Lancaster doth speak of you." Lancaster's another name for King Henry. King Henry goes by Lancaster. Sometimes he's Henry Bolingbroke. Lancaster, he's the House of Lancaster. "As oft as Lancaster doth speak of you, his cheek looks pale, and with a rising sigh he wisheth you in heaven." Hotspur replies, "And you in hell." Great antithesis there between heaven and hell. "And you in hell," as oft as he hears Owen Glendower spoke of. Glendower says, "I cannot blame him. At my nativity, the front of heaven was full of fiery shapes. So when I was born, the whole world seemed to react to it. The stars shot madly from their spheres. The front of heaven was full of fiery shapes of burning cressets, and at my birth the frame and huge foundation of the earth shaked like a coward." You'll notice it's a shared line here. There's several points where these two characters have shared lines. That suggests that one character is interrupting the other, not allowing him to completely finish his thought. "The frame and huge foundation of the earth shaked like a coward. Why, so it would have done at the same season, if your mother's cat had but kittened, though yourself had never been born." So it was a wild night the night you were born. It would have, too, if a cat would have had kittens. It doesn't matter. It's not like the stars were afraid of you. Now, Glendower is trying to make this case. They were indeed, that there were signs when he was born that he would be great. He says, "I say the earth did shake when I was born. And I say the earth was not of my mind, if you suppose as fearing you it shook. The heavens were all on fire, the earth did tremble." So here these two men already getting into this argument over what the stars were doing the day Glendower was born, and whether or not they forecast some sort of greatness for him. Glendower certainly did. Hotspur doesn't believe in any of the astrology or that the stars mean anything. Doesn't buy it. Hotspur, They go on. Mortimer, now Edmund Mortimer, he's the guy who's got the legitimate claim, maybe a legitimate claim to the throne. He plays peacekeeper in this scene. This first time we get to see him as a character. Line 50, he's trying to calm Hotspur down. So he says, "Peace, cousin Percy." Remember, Percy's also another name for the Percy family. Hotspur is Henry Percy. His father's also Henry Percy. But Percy's their family name. "Peace, cousin Percy. You'll make him mad." Glendower says, he claims to be a magician, to have magical powers. "I can call spirits from the vasty deep." Hotspur says, "Huh, why, so can I, or so can any man, but will they come when you do call for them?" Glendower says, why, I can teach you, cousin, to command the devil. Hotspur says, and I can teach thee, cuz, to shame the devil by telling truth. Tell truth and shame the devil. If thou have power to raise him, bring him hither, and I'll be sworn I have power to shame him hence. Oh, while you live, tell truth and shame the devil. He doesn't believe in the supernatural the way Glendower does. Mortimer tries once again, line 60, to get these two to, let's talk about the war. Let's focus, people. Come, no more of this unprofitable chat. So we've got this, we already, from our first time we see these rebels grouped together, Glendower and Hotspur, we already get the sense they don't work so well together. And that's sort of, just like some of the other foreshadowing in the play, suggests what might be to come when they're on the battlefield, what's going to happen when they face off against King Henry, Prince Hal, and the loyalists of the army. All right. The second half of the scene is quite interesting, and it changes tone. And we see the wives brought on stage. So you'll recall from earlier in the play, Edmund Mortimer joined with Glendower, and they sealed their partnership because Edmund Mortimer, married Glendower's daughter. King Henry, way back in Act 1, mentioned this. He said this is proof that Mortimer is a traitor. He's married Glendower's daughter. Well, now we see her on stage. And curiously, she doesn't speak any English. She's one of the few Shakespearean characters who speaks no English. When we get to Henry V, we're going to see another character who speaks almost no English. She's trying to learn. When you meet her, Henry V's French princess, who he ends up. Well, we'll get to that. You'll get to that when you read Henry V. But Owen Glendower's daughter, Edmund Mortimer's wife, she doesn't speak English. She only speaks Welsh. And Mortimer's saddened by this, that his wife can't speak the same language that he can. That's frustrating. Line 188, Mortimer says, "This is the deadly spite that angers me. My wife can speak no English. I know Welsh." So we had this fiery scene earlier. Now we sort of have this more domestic moment where the wives come out. It went from being a very masculine scene with this war room battle. It's going to end as a much more softer, feminine kind of scene in which this daughter, this wife who speaks no English, sings. We'll get to that in just a moment. 190. Glendower has to translate for his daughter so that Mortimer can understand. Glendower says, "My daughter weeps. She'll not part with you. She'll be a soldier too. She'll to the wars. She doesn't want to lose her husband. She wants him to stay." And in the next passage, there's exchange where Mortimer speaks in English, she speaks in Welsh, and we don't get the lines. We don't get a translation. We don't know what she says. We can sort of guess what's said, and it ends with. She wants to sing him a song, and this is a really nice sort of tender moment before war. We see the same sort of tender moment before war happen in other plays as well. A good example being Julius Caesar before the Civil War there. There's a sort of these tender moments that Shakespeare puts in to make these soldiers human and give us some sense of sympathy for them. Line 209, Glendower translating for his daughter says, "She bids you on the wanton rushes lay you down, and rest your gentle head upon her lap, and she will sing the song that pleaseth you." And in line 218, Mortimer, a few lines later, says, "With all my heart I'll sit and hear her sing." So we have this really nice scene in the embedded stage direction that he sits down, she sits down, he lays next to her, puts his head on her lap. Very tender moment. And then Hotspur seeing this, he also has Lady Percy with him. We met her in Act 2. A little more fiery relationship between those two. Hotspur also wants a tender moment with his wife. He says in line 224, "Come, Kate, thou art perfect in lying down. Come, quick, that I may lay my head in thy lap." And she says, "Go, ye giddy goose." How you deliver that line varies. Actresses get some choices and how the relationship. There's not a lot of lines, but remember, Kate's a really fun character to play, and how she reacts. You can be playful with this, but she does sit down, and Hotspur also has his head in her lap. So again, this very sort of domestic, soft moment after the more fiery argument that we saw between Glendower and Hotspur earlier. And then after the Welsh song is done, Hotspur says, "Come, Kate, I'll have your song too." Line 242. "Come, Kate, I'll have your song too." But she doesn't sing for him. She won't sing for him. She says, "Not mine, in good sooth." And then line 254, he's asked again. She says, "I will not sing." And she doesn't sing for him. So there's there's a nice soft sort of touch to this scene, but it's also, you see a little bit of clash in their personality. And if you'll remember, they've had this disagreement since Act 2. It's been going between Kate and Hotspur. And again, this might be a sense of foreshadowing. Kate does not want him going off and fighting in her brother's war, in Mortimer's war. Remember, Kate is brother to Mortimer. So there's a lot. They've formed this alliance, but it's also backed up through marriage, through bonding their families together. And Kate doesn't want her husband fighting in her brother's war if she could prevent it. But just sort of like in the last act where she said, yeah, do what you're going to do. I can't stop you anyway. Sort of the same thing here. Do what you're going to do. I can't stop you anyway. But I'm not singing for you. I'm not singing for you the way that Glendower's daughter will sing for Mortimer. Interesting moment, and as a director, actor, actress is on stage, you have to decide what you're going to do with that. Act 3, Scene 2, we have a shift back to London. And for the first time, we see Henry IV and his son, Prince Hal, in the same room. And it's just the two of them. And Shakespeare is explicit. It's only these two. There's no one else in the room. This is a father-son moment, and it's a private moment. Another domestic sort of moment, though much different than the one we just saw in Act 3, Scene 1. The king says, to open Act 3, Scene 2, "Lords, give us leave. The Prince of Wales and I must have some private conference. But be near at hand, for we shall presently have need of you. So step out of the room. We're going to have private conference. My son and me are going to talk." And we know that Prince Hal's in a little bit of trouble here. He knows that he's going to be reprimanded for his behavior. And in fact, that was the beautiful scene, Act 2, Scene 4, where we saw them practice for it. Falstaff and Prince Hal practice for this moment. So we would think Prince Hal's, he's ready for this. He knows what's coming. He knows what he's going to say. Although, they're not going to talk about Falstaff. They're going to mention that you hang out with some bad company, but Falstaff's not mentioned by name. Though he's in the back of our minds as an audience as we see the scene play out. Now, King Henry has one of his longest speech. I think it's his longest speech in the whole play. Probably, I think it's the longest speech in the whole play. And he reprimands Prince Hal. Let's start at line 46 and work through a little bit of what the argument that he makes. He's arguing that by being seen, by being such a public figure, you're wasting yourself. You need to be a rarer sight. Line 46. "By being seldom seen, I could not stir, but like a comet I was wondered at." So in my own childhood, I was like a comet. You don't see comets every day, but when you do see them, you wonder at them. "That men would tell their children, 'This is he.' Others would say, 'Where? Which is Bolingbroke?' And then I stole all courtesy from heaven and dressed myself in such humility that I did pluck allegiance from men's hearts." So when they did see me, though, they saw something special. And I made sure it was something special. With my humility, I plucked courtesy. I stole courtesy from heaven, plucked allegiance from their hearts. I put on a good show when they did see me, but I made sure it was a rare occurrence. "Loud shouts and salutations from their mouths, even in the presence of the crowned king." This was before he was king, when Richard II was still king, but yet they looked at me as being something special. "Thus did I keep my person fresh and new, my presence like a robe pontifical, ne'er seen but wondered at, and so my state, seldom but sumptuous, showed like a feast, and won by rareness such solemnity. The skipping king," referring to Richard II, he was far too public with himself, "the skipping king, he ambled up and down with shallow jeeters and rash braven wits, soon kindled and soon burnt, carded his state, mingled his royalty with capering fools, had his great name profaned with their scorns, and gave his countenance against his name to laugh at gibing boys." So Richard II acted an awful lot like you do. He mingled too much with the common people. It's one thing to every now and then, on occasion, mingle with the common people and let them see how grand you are, but not all the time. You're doing it like Richard II used to do, and that was his downfall. Now, whether that was really Richard II's downfall is a topic for debate. But this is how King Henry presents this. he goes on. This is a long passage, so let's skip a little bit further ahead. Now he's talking about the war, and he gets a long time where he rants to Prince Hal before Prince Hal finally is allowed to speak his mind. And when your father's the king, first of all, it's your father, so you listen to what he has to say, whether you want to or not, you do. And it's the king, so you listen to what he has to say. And Hal doesn't get a lot to say early in the scene. He has he hits two lines here, which is a shared line, which he has to. The king gets him a line and a half before the king picks right back up. Still going. Line 112. Now the king has moved on, and he's now talking about the war in the north that's happening, and he's especially talking about Hotspur. You remember in Act 1. King Henry had said, Prince Hal doesn't know he said this, but he said, I wish Hotspur was my son instead of Prince Hal because he's a better warrior. He's made a better name for himself. I wish some tripping fairy had changed them at birth. And here we can sort of hear that same sort of affection. Even though Hotspur is now his enemy, he has an affection for Hotspur because of his skill as a warrior. And the name, he would be proud if Hotspur were his son instead of his enemy. Here at line 112, we hear more of that. Thrice had this Hotspur, Mars in swaddling clothes. Mars is the god of war, so to call someone Mars is actually quite respectful if you're talking about a warrior. Thrice had this Hotspur, Mars in swaddling clothes, this infant warrior. In his enterprises discomfited great Douglas. Ta'en him once, enlarged him, and made a friend of him to fill the mouth of deep defiance up. So he beat the guy 3 times. Now he's got him to join his side against me. To fill the mouth of deep defiance up and shake the peace and safety of our throne. What say you to this? Percy, Northumberland, the Archbishops Grace of York, Douglas, Mortimer, capitulate against us and are up. All these soldiers, all these different men have allied themselves together, and they're fighting against us. Where have you been? You've been out showing yourself like an everyday person instead of preparing for war. You haven't been doing the right things, son. He continues. And then finally, after a long speech, finally Prince Hal gets to speak. And Hal is very good at speaking. He's good at speaking to Falstaff. He's good at speaking to Bardolph, Peto. Now we see him, and we had that soliloquy at the end of Act 1 where he talked directly to us, and we got a sense of his inner self, his knightly self, his sort of the princely version of himself. Now we see it again, and in one speech he convinces his father of his true warrior-like spirit, and his father is forgives everything in this speech. Partially, I suppose, because he wants to, he needs to be able to believe in his son, but also because Prince Hal is quite convincing. He's good with words. He's Hamlet-like in that, I suppose. He's very good at the rhetoric, at the language. Line 138. We'll skip to the middle of his speech and read through to the end. If you don't have your book open, make sure to open up and follow along with me when I read these. Act 3, Scene 2, line 138. He's talking, and he's going to talk about Hotspur here. And that shall be the day when ere it lights, that this same child of honor and renown, this gallant Hotspur, this all-praised knight, and your unthought of Harry shall chance to meet. We're going to meet on the battlefield, Hotspur and me. We're going to meet, and when that day comes, I'm going to win. That's what the speech is about, and he convinces his father that this is what will happen. This gallant Hotspur, this all-praised knight, and your unthought of Harry chance to meet. For every honor sitting on his helm, would they were multitudes. And on my head, my shame's redoubled. So I'm going to go with all these shames that you've accused me of. They're true. And he's got all this great honor on his side, and we're going to face off. My shame's redoubled. For the time will come that I shall make this northern youth exchange his glorious deeds for my indignities. And we're going to trade places. When we fight, we're going to trade places, and I'm going to take all of his honor from him when I defeat him in battle. Percy is but my factor. Percy, remember, is another name for Hotspur. That's his family name. Percy is but my factor, good my lord, to engross up glorious deeds on my behalf. And I will call him to so strict account that he shall render every glory up, yea, even the slightest worship of his time, or I will tear the reckonings from his heart. This in the name of God I promise here, the which if he be pleased I shall perform. I do beseech your majesty may salve the long-grown wounds of my intemperance. This will be the medicine that will right my name, that will correct my name. I will win his honor. If not, the end of life cancels all bonds. I will fight to the death to earn my honor against Hotspur. And I will die 100,000 deaths ere break the smallest parcel of this vow. I will fight until 100,000 deaths before I break this vow. And the king is completely convinced. He gets 2 lines here. 100,000 rebels die in this. Thou shalt have charge and sovereign trust herein. You got it. Oh, good. I am so proud of you, son. I'm giving you my army to fight with, and I am giving you my sovereign trust, my kingly trust. I trust you now. I believe what you're saying. And that's how convincing Hal is. Act 3, Scene 3, the last scene of the play, returns back to the tavern. The same tavern in Eastcheap where we were in for Act 2, Scene 4, where we last saw Falstaff. It opens again with Falstaff. Falstaff has a great line to open near the beginning of the scene. Line 10, Act 3, Scene 3, line 10. Follow along with me in your book. Why, there it is. Come, he's talking to Bardolph. Come, sing me a bawdy song. Make me merry. I was as virtuously given as a gentleman need to be. Virtuous enough. Swore a little. Diced not above 7 times. I gambled not more than 7 times a week. Went to a bawdy house. A bawdy house would be a whore house. Went to a bawdy house not above once in a quarter of an hour. Paid money that I borrowed 3 or 4 times. Lived well and in good compass. And now I live out of all order, out of all compass. So he's very melancholy here. He says, I used to be a good man. I used to do good things like pay my bills. Well, I did 3 or 4 times. And I used to not go to a whorehouse, not too often, not more than once a quarter of an hour. So we have this very serious scene where Prince Hal brings himself back to his princely state. Now we have a very silly scene, or at least it starts off silly. Falstaff, though, has a problem, too. He's been pickpocketed. If you remember at the end of Act 2, Scene 4, Prince Hal picked his pocket at the very end of that scene. And now he's blaming Mistress Quigley for it. He stays in this tavern, a tavern-inn, and he lives there with Mistress Quigley, or lives in her tavern, her inn, and he blames her. Why, I had my pocket picked in your house. Line 39, he says, How now, Dame Partlet the hen? Have you inquired yet who picked my pocket? And she doesn't believe him. Nobody picked your pocket. She says, Why, Sir John, what do you think, Sir John? Do you think I keep thieves in my house? I have searched. I have inquired. So has my husband, man by man, boy by boy, servant by servant. The tithe of a hair was never lost in my house before. But he did have his pocket picked. Now he's going to lie, though, about what was picked. He's going to say, just like he said before in Act 2, Scene 4, there were 100 men that he fought against. He's going to lie and say, I had all this money in my pocket. I had a great expensive ring that was stolen. None of it's true. She goes on, Mistress Quigley, line 55. Now, as I am a true woman, Holland of 8 shillings an ell, you owe me money here besides, Sir John, for your diet and by-drinkings and money lent you £24. You owe me £24, and you've made up this story so you don't have to pay me the money you owe me. It's not completely true, but it's at least it's partially. It's probably more true than not. He says, Falstaff points at Bardolph at this point. Says he had his part of it. Let him pay. She looks at Bardolph. He? Alas, he's poor. He had nothing. How poor? Look upon his face. They're always making fun of Bardolph's face. It's a red face. He's always drunk, so his face is red and splotched with red spots. What, call you rich? Let him coin his nose. Let him coin his cheeks. I'll not pay a denier. What, will you make a yonker of me? Shall I not take mine ease and mine in, but I shall have my pocket picked? I have lost a seal ring of my grandfather's worth 40 mark. She doesn't buy it. It's not true. It's not worth that much. Oh, Jesu. I have heard the prince tell him I know not how oft that ring was copper. And Falstaff here. How? The prince is a jack, a sneak-up, God's blood. And he were here, I would cudgel him like a dog if he would say so. And, of course, right on cue, here comes Prince Hal. And Prince Hal's going to be a little bit playful here, but really he's got to be serious, too. He's saying his goodbyes, and he's actually gathering men to go off and fight as well. Line 76, here's the prince. What sayest thou, Jack? And Falstaff goes on to tell him, my pocket was picked. Now, he doesn't know that it was Prince Hal who picked his pocket or had his pocket picked. The other night I fell asleep here behind the arras and had my pocket picked. This house is turned bawdy house. They pick pockets. What didst thou lose, Jack? Ha, will thou believe me, Hal? 3 or 4 bonds of 40 pound apiece, and a seal ring of my grandfather's. Ah, trifle. Some 8-penny matter. It was worth 8 cents. That's all it was. It was nothing. And they go on for a long time. They have this little banter that's sort of, it's this nice moment where they're still in that old kind of relation, that older version of the relationship that they had, and they sort of get to share that one last time or one more time. But the opportunities for this are dwindling, where they can sort of have that kind of friendship they once had. Line 105, he rates Mistress Quigley at this point for her house, for her tavern, for being pickpocketed in her tavern. And the prince, though, Prince Hal, takes her side. The end of line 105, he says, he slanders thee most grossly. And then she points out, well, he slandered you too, your royal highness. So he doth you, my lord, and said this other day you owed him 1,000 pound. Sirrah, says the Prince Hal, do I owe you 1,000 pound? Falstaff, he's had to come up with some kind of an answer. Well, 1,000 pound, hell, 1,000,000! Thy love is worth 1,000,000, and thou owest me thy love. Falstaff's just as witty as Prince Hal. That's why they get along so well, is because they have this repartee between them. Hostess says, nay, nay, my lord. He called you Jack and said he would cudgel you. Did I, Bardolph? And Bardolph's not the sharpest. He's not nearly as sharp, and his wit isn't anywhere near Falstaff's or near Prince Hal's. Did I, Bardolph? Well, indeed, Sir John, you said so. Yeah, if he said my ring was copper. And here we have Prince Hal challenges him on that. I say 'tis copper. Darest thou be as good as thy word now? Your ring is copper. Are you going to cudgel me? Why, Hal, thou knowest, as thou art but man, I dare. But as thou art prince, I fear thee, as I fear the roaring of the lion's whelp. So I fear thee the same way I would fear attacking a lion's kitten. And the prince says, and why not as a lion? And that can be taken very seriously, or it could still be silly. But I think you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice how you're going to read that line. But certainly you can sense the tension that's starting to form for Prince Hal, and whether that's external conflict between him and Falstaff yet, or it's still internal, it's there. And the Falstaff, he says, the king himself is to be feared as the lion. Dost thou think I'll fear thee as thy father? I'm not going to be afraid of the lion's kitten. I'm only afraid of the lion himself. And at this, the prince sort of loses it, and he tells the truth. This feels a lot like Act 4, Scene 2, where Falstaff keeps getting caught in these lies. The question is that you have to decide as an actor, as a director, is whether or not when he gets caught in these lies, whether or not it's all still in fun, or if at some point it changes and becomes more serious. Line 124, Prince Hal rates him. Why, thou whoreson, impotent, embossed rascal, if there were anything in thy pocket but tavern reckoning, so bills that you owed at taverns, memorandums of bawdy houses, so money you owe at the whore houses, the bawdy houses, and 1 poor pennyworth of sugar candy to make thee long-winded, if thy pocket were enriched with any other injuries but these, I am a villain. And yet you will stand to it, you will not pocket up wrong. Art thou not ashamed? Falstaff replies, dost thou hear, Hal? Thou knowest in the state of innocency Adam fell. Adam, when the world was innocent, fell. What should poor Jack Falstaff do in these days of villainy? Thou seest I have more flesh than another man. He had another comment on his girth. And therefore more frailty. You confess then you picked my pocket? It appears so by the story. And he turns to Mistress Quigley and says, Hostess, I forgive thee. Go make ready breakfast. Falstaff's quite a character. Go make ready breakfast. He turns to, a few lines later, line 138, he turns back to Prince Hal after Mistress Quigley exits. Now, Hal, to the news at court. For the robbery, lad, how is that answered? And Prince Hal's taking care of the issue. He says, oh, my sweet beef, I must still be good angel to thee. The money is paid back again. Falstaff doesn't like having to pay back the money that's been robbed. Oh, I do not like that paying back. 'Tis a double labor. Because he has to go through the robbery, and we all heard him complain about how hard that was. Now he has to go to the trouble of paying the money back. Act 3 ends with Prince Hal calling upon Bardolph Peto and Falstaff to join him in the coming war as soldiers. He employs Bardolph, line 154 and 155. He says to Bardolph, "Go bear this letter to Lord John of Lancaster." That's his youngest brother. The second, Prince Hal is next in line to be king. His brother John would be second in line to be king. He's an important character in the Henry VI plays. "Go bear this letter to Lord John of Lancaster, to my brother John, this to my Lord of Westmoreland." So Bardolph exits. He's been sent to deliver these letters. Then he turns to Peto. He says, "Go, Peto, to horse, for thou and I have 30 miles yet to ride ere dinner time. Go get the horses ready." And not like the horses getting them ready either in Act 2. No silliness here. They're getting ready to ride to war. And then he turns to Falstaff, and he's going to give Falstaff an opportunity in this war too. He's going to give him a charge of men. And he says to him, "Jack, meet me tomorrow in the Temple Hall at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There shalt thou know thy charge, and there receive money and order for their furniture. The land is burning." That's a great line. The land is burning. We sense the seriousness of the civil war that's brewing from the north. The land is burning. Percy, referring to Hotspur, Percy stands on high, and either we or they must die. Either we win or they win. The land is burning. And so ends Act 3. In Acts 4 and 5, we'll actually see that battle scene, the two storylines of the play that so far have been separate. The Hotspur storyline, the Prince Hal storyline, they're going to clash, and we're going to see that in the Acts 4 and 5 as we move toward the culmination, toward the end of the play.